So when you ask yourself some of the deeper questions and you get an answer that scares the shit out of you, like, how do you move forward with that?
I mean, honestly, the thing that comes to mind for me, and I think a lot of women will understand this, particularly women who are perimenopausal. And you said, like, we get to a place where we just sort of, the people pleasing strips away, is I had, this isn't in the book, but this is just a truth, that I had an awareness in my spirit for a very long time that my relationship was unhealthy, but I could not understand why. And I mean, for years. And I talked to people and I talked to therapists and I just tried. And it was, my intuition was screaming at me, like just screaming at me for years. But I had been taught to ignore that. You know, I had been taught, like you said, sort of outside, like, well, what do they think? And what do people prefer? And what does my family approve of? And what, all of these things were stacked against me. And it took a very long time for me to understand that these feelings I was having, the anxiety in my body, the illnesses that I was, just all of it was the stress of like, something's wrong and I'm ignoring it and pretending like it's not. And even knowing that this needed to end, it was very unhealthy on both sides, I could not find the courage to even admit that to myself. I didn't walk around for months and months and months going like, oh, I don't think this relationship works anymore. I don't think this is good for either of us. I don't think this is good for my kids. I didn't sit around with that knowledge. I just kept going. I just kept like turning it over and over. And I want to say that just in case there's anyone listening to this that finds himself in a similar place of like, something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong. And I remember going on a very long walk, like probably walk for 10 miles. And I was just trying to understand it and trying to figure it out. And I was turning over and over in my mind. And it was like between one breath and the next, like one step. I remember exactly where I was walking around the lake in Austin. Just one step, it was like, I have to get divorced. Like it's that. It's like, it's done. We've tried everything. It's been years. Like something's wrong. And I want to say this too. I didn't understand what was wrong until many years later. And that was
once you had space.
Yes, once I had space and could see with clarity. And that's something I never hear people talk about. The willingness to listen to your gut and to listen to your intuition when you don't have any proof that what that gut is telling you is right. And that is so brutal because nobody in your life understands why you're making the choice that you're making. Yeah. And doing it in a public way, like just all of those things. And it wasn't until so many years later that I was like, thank God. Thank God. Yeah. You know, I think as
you stood up for yourself.
Yes. And as parents, especially, I think sometimes we will stay in things much longer than we should because we think, I have to do it. It'll destroy my kids. And now I'm like, that was me saving us. That was like, we have to move on from this thing. So that was a really good example of, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. And I didn't have the courage for a very long time to face that truth.
Do it. Yeah.
So I really, it's about like, at least just taking the step, at least sort of looking in the closet for the monster, at least just like, what is there? And then once I know what's there, at least I am informed of what I can do next. Because I think a lot of us, you know, we ignore it. We numb out. We focus on the kids. We focus on work. We do all of these other things so that we don't have to hold truth for what's really going on in our life.
Yeah. You know, I had a really good friend say to me this spring, just this year, I mean, you're learning it at 41. I'm just starting to learn many of these pieces at 55. And I had a really good friend that just came in one day and she said, you know what surprises me so much about you, Mindy, is that you are so scared to disappoint all the people you love in your life, but you have no problem disappointing yourself.
Brutal, but so good.
So good.